Turn on your microphones, please. The Burke County Planning Board meeting of May 27th, 2021 is now in session. Our first order of business, well, I'd like to welcome everybody that's here. Glad to see your participation and the help. If you have a cell phone, please put it on buzz or turn it off. We appreciate it.
Might want to mention the procedure about they'll have 3 minutes and if they intend to.
Do we want to approve the minutes first and stuff like that?
Yeah. Our first agenda item is approval of the minutes of the May 22nd, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I got a second. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, really quick, I'll do this now, just in case, because we've got some issues to take on. If you're going to speak, you have 3 minutes, okay? Jennifer will explain it to you later. She has a bell, she'll ring it, and if the bell doesn't shut you up, I got a gavel. And my aim's pretty good. Okay. Zoning map amendment 2021-02. Venture Capital is the applicant. Pete, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We got a full night of cases to hear tonight, and we're going to try to get through them as quick as we can. Jennifer will chime in on the discussion times when the public comment portion of the meeting is open, and but otherwise we'll go through starting with a zoning map amendment tonight. This would be zoning map amendment 2021-02. The applicant is Venture Capital LLC. We also have Morganton Federal Savings and High Country Timber and Mulch, or Lumber and Mulch, excuse me. So let me get my slides working here for us, hopefully. There we go. So back in October 27, 2005, Venture Capital proposed this subdivision. It was called Hawksbill subdivision. This was the master plan that was adopted at that time, and the property was rezoned as well to planned residential mixed-use conditional district. The conditional district had to do with this plan here. As you can see, there were different amenities and things that were proposed at that time, and so that's what was approved at that time. Well, phase 1 was platted and approved, and lots began to be sold there. Shortly after that time, you probably all recall that we had a bit of a recession beginning in 07, 08, and actually lasted in Burke County through a good part of 2012. Well, that hurt a lot of folks in development and building trades, and so they never really moved past phase 1 of the Hawksbill subdivision. Well, as time went on, the developer had some opportunities and offers to sell portions of Hawksbill subdivision to other entities, and they had done that. Well, the development plan is still in force, and so if those folks wanted to develop their property, they would have to develop it according to this plan. The applicant tonight, Venture Capital, wants to kind of clear the slate on this subdivision and allow for the owners that may want to purchase these other parcels and have purchased these parcels to develop it in the way that they want to develop it rather than having to follow this development plan. And so the first part of the rezoning request is to rescind the master development plan. Now, the phase one is still there and would abide by the Hawksbill restrictions and covenants that were also established. However, the development plan would go away. So that's request one, to rescind that Hawksbill development plan. Second request is to rezone 35 parcels of land out of here, out of the Hawksbill subdivision, from the current planned residential mixed-use conditional district, since that conditional was part of the master plan. So those properties are proposed to be rezoned from that district to the residential one district, which is primarily single-family home district. A second request, or third request actually, is on the part of, let's see if I can get my maps working here, is to, Morganton Federal owns this property here. It's about 3 acres, and they have always intended, from the time they purchased that property, to use it commercially. At one time, they thought of perhaps bringing a branch out to that area. Don't necessarily know that that's still going to happen, but they don't want to lose that ability to develop it commercially. So they're requesting that rather than the R1 district, this property be rezoned to general business. And then the fourth request is from High Country Lumber and Mulch, who are on this parcel here. It's approximately 30 acres, and they are also requesting to rezone that property instead of R1 to general business as well. And finally, the fifth request actually came from one of the property owners that purchased this property here. He's owned that for a number of years, and he bought it with some future plans in mind, and so now he's wishing that it not be rezoned to R1, which only allows residential dwellings. He's actually requesting that it go to, instead of planned residential mixed-use conditional district, just revert back to planned residential mixed use. And that will be shown in a map coming up. But here is the existing land uses, and as you can see, the white areas are vacant land, or was at the time this map was made. There's one home in yellow there, but for the most part, no other parcels have been actually developed. And then this is the future land use map, and this is showing you that it is part of the Lake James planning area. That's part of the 2016-2030 Burke County Strategic Land Use Plan. Kind of is the guiding document for development in the county, and this area falls under that Lake James planning area. You also see that down here at this location is what some call commercial node, or a commercial planning area, but that's the corner of North Powerhouse Road and NC 126. And if you know that area, there's already a fire station there, a restaurant, a water tower, I think real estate office, and maybe something else. So there is commercial development already established in that area, and that coincides with that being a commercial node there. And let's see, here is the current zoning ordinance, and as you see, this is planned residential mixed-use conditional district. Those hash lines is what separates that planned residential mixed use from the planned residential conditional mixed-use district. So it's all currently zoned the same way, and the applicant's proposing to rescind that development plan and do some rezoning within the subdivision. So here is the proposed zoning map, and these properties up here, you have existing R1 district up in here. That's already established. You have R1 down here as well. So the applicant and the county agrees that it makes sense if you're going to do away with that planned residential mixed-use conditional district, and the primary development you want is single-family homes, to rezone that Hawksbill subdivision to R1. Now, here is Morganton Federal and High Country Lumber and Mulch. They are proposing to rezone those properties to general business, and as you see, it coincides with the commercial general business down at that commercial node. That little one there is neighborhood business, and this little parcel is planned residential mixed use without the conditions. They were not part of that original conditional district rezoning. This last remaining parcel is the 9 acres, 9+ acres that the one property owner wanted to remain as planned residential mixed use. So that is basically the request for this. At this time, I think I threw some slides in that kind of give you an idea, if you hadn't been to the area, what's out there. This is the Hawksbill subdivision entrance. This is looking back east, I believe, on NC 126. That other one was looking west. And then there's, again, the entrance to the Hawksbill subdivision. And as you can see, the sign here is showing the Phase 1 development there. This is the entrance to the Hawksbill subdivision. And then I think these are just some random slides of the surrounding development in the area. There's the fire station, the water tower, three-way supply there. I don't think there's a restaurant directly across the street over here. I don't think I included a slide of that, but here's the comments for this rezoning. Staff is on board in favor of what the applicant's proposing to do here. It would be consistent with the zoning in that area, be consistent with the strategic land use plan, and so staff recommends approving this rezoning as presented.
That's it.
That's it.
With the Would the applicant come forward, please? From Venture Capital, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
What is your name, sir?
Buddy Fisher.
Sir, do you have anything to add?
No, I think he covered it pretty well.
Good.
Okay.
Does anybody on the board have a question for Pete or the applicant?
You know,
No? No? Okay. Then what's the pleasure of the board?
when do you want to open it up for public comment?
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's been a long night. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have to do this. We open it up for public comment. Does anyone here in the public have a comment about this? No? We close the public comment section. The pleasure of the board.
Make a motion that ZMA 2021-02 filed by Venture Capital to rezone multiple parcels of land within the Hawksbill subdivision is approved as submitted.
Do I hear a second? I've got a second. All in favor? It's carried. Next is ZMA 202103. Pete, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This again is a rezoning request by a private citizen. Let me get to that slide. Tyler Campbell is proposing to rezone a portion, 1.23 approximately acre portion of his property, which totals 9.86 acres. The request is to rezone that 1.23 acre portion from the current residential 2 district to general business. The property has frontage on NC 18, US 64 out here, a little bit outside of town, and he has purchased that property and has plans to possibly develop it for his tree service business that he has. And so he's looking to rezone that front portion to general business. The surrounding area, if I get my maps to work here, that's our existing land use map, and you can see the red is general business here. This is the subject property here. This is Morganton's jurisdiction down through here. Those that may know that area, those schools down the street, down here. I believe there's a cell tower over here. And then there's, of course, some residential development across the street here. This future land use map shows this as secondary growth area, which is just on the outside of the gray, which is the primary growth area. And as you notice, that's the city of Morganton jurisdiction. So the county expects at some point in time that to expand out into the secondary growth area, and so the uses in the secondary growth area will sort of complement the primary growth area to allow both residential and non-residential development within that secondary growth area. Okay, then we have here our current zoning map, and again the Morganton jurisdiction here, and then the subject property is zoned R2, as is a lot of property across the street and up to the north and south there. But you got your general business property here, neighborhood business up here, turns to residential 3 up here, although that other map, I believe there's a, yeah, there's, although that's zoned R3, I believe, that does have a commercial use on that property. So it's in close proximity to an existing commercial zoning district, neighborhood business zoning district. So it does make this appropriate from a zoning standpoint. It's not a spot zone, so to speak. So here's the property, NC 1864, looking north, traveling southwest is that same road, and you see back in the distance probably the lights for the ball fields or whatever at the school. Let's see. Okay, this is the subject property here, and the applicant has appeared to, cleared off some land here, and then this is the Catawba Valley Baptist Church, which adjoins the property here. This is back towards Morganton. This is the subject property here, and then the adjoining property to the north there, which is undeveloped. That's a fairly good-sized piece of land there in between. And directly across the street is a barn structure and home that's directly across the street. Okay, so that is the photos and maps that I have for this. Again, this would be something that could be appropriate for this area, as there is already general business zoning in the area. The applicant is just proposing to rezone about, I can hold my hand steady, about that much of the front part of the property to the general business. The remainder would remain R2 back there. I believe the applicant mentioned that he intends at some point to build a home in the back portion. You can't have a home on general business property, and you can't have a business on residential property, so that's where the rezoning request comes from. That basically concludes my presentation.
Would the applicant, Mr. Campbell, please come forward?
Mr. Campbell, if you would, step up here, give us your name, write your name on this paper for us. Anyone that may be wishing to speak for public comment, when you come up, the paper will be here. You will also need to write your name and give us your name. Thank you.
My name's Tyler Campbell.
Okay, do you have anything to add, or,
I think you pretty well covered it.
okay, fine? I was gonna ask you about the house, but he clarified that.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Okay, do you guys have any questions?
I do, I have a question.
Okay, go.
So, your business, are you gonna be operating that during certain hours there?
Actually,
Days?
nothing happens at the land. It's basically just a place to park my equipment, pretty much.
Okay.
All our work is done off-site.
Okay, anybody else?
I have a question for
Go.
Pete. Pete, I see here that this land is also part of the Morganton extra ETJ.
Extraterritorial?
Are they also gonna have to do anything regarding this?
No, the property is outlined in red, and it just so happens that Morganton's ETJ is outlined in red. It actually stops right here. So it's not in Morganton's ETJ.
Not even up at that very top corner like it shows? If you look at that image, you'll see where, okay.
No, it's entirely within Burke County jurisdiction. That little bit of a mapping thing there, it's hard to, when you're doing a whole county, to get every little
Got it. Just wanted to make sure that
piece.
we didn't have to
Exact- No,
have any more
that's
of
a
his
good
comments.
question. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
You said it was a tree business?
Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about the equipment, is it big trucks that are gonna be pulling in and out of there?
Bucket truck, chipper, dump truck, that sort of thing.
Do y'all worry at all, Pete, about how busy that road is, coming around that curve, pulling big equipment out of there?
So what, if the rezoning is approved, that's just the first step of the process. Mr. Campbell would have to submit a site development plan for that, which shows the property and a building I think you're gonna have on there for the equipment to be housed inside. And so during that site plan review, we will send that plan out to different departments and agencies. So NCDOT would be one of those departments that review it, and they can require whatever may need to be done there, if anything. They would issue at the minimum a driveway permit, but if there's anything special that need to be put in place, DOT would require that.
Okay? Anybody else? Okay, I'll again have to open up for a public to hear. Anybody from the public wants to speak? Nobody? So I'll close the public meeting. And what's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion that ZMA 2021-03, to request to rezone one parcel of land totaling 9.86 acres from residential to district.
No, we're just rezoning
Portion 1.23.
Oh,
the
one-
1.4,
right.
yeah. 1 point, yeah.
Be approved as submitted.
Do I hear a second? I got a second. All in favor? The motion's carried. One last point for for Venture Capital and for Mr. Campbell. This will go before the county commissioners.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were asking me about the ordinance. This will go to
Okay.
the commissioners
July.
in July. July the 20th.
What?
July the 20th.
This will go before the Board of Commissioners July 20th, 2021. Pete, you'll notify them?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you'll be notified, but July 20th, 2020, the presentation will be made, and then final say-so is the Board of Commissioners. Okay, gentlemen? Thank you for coming, and we'll move on. Okay,
I think
we go for zoning text amendment 2021-01, draft 2021 Burke County zoning ordinances.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to do this a little differently.
Okay?
We have a list of those folks who are wishing to speak, and we'll use that list to call them up.
Yeah, and may want to ask the board if they want to take a brief recess before we get into this.
Before we get into the public.
You may want to ask if they might want to do that.
I think we're good.
Pardon?
I think we're good.
Good?
Okay.
Push on.
Okay.
We just push on? Okay. All right, fine. Good. Okay, report from the planning department. Pete, you're up again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, this, for the members of the public, this begins a county-initiated text amendment and subsequent rezonings. There's, I think, 5 of those that's part of this as well. And so we got to start with the text amendment for the zoning ordinance adoption. And that comes first because the rezonings that follow kind of piggyback on what would be approved if the ordinance is approved. So I'll just give you some background here on, let me get into that presentation.
Oh, that's nice.
I think we saw this before. Okay, so a little background. Many people, when we put out our questionnaire about a month ago or so, and we held several meetings with the public, it seemed like some folks didn't know that Burke County had zoning. And that kind of hurt my feelings. You know? That's my job right there. And they didn't even know, you know, I worked here. So I want to give you a little background here so you'll know that Burke County does have zoning and who I am. Been with the county 14 and a half years, and people didn't know me. That's unfortunate. But way back in 1996, actually, Burke County had formulated a zoning ordinance, and that was formally adopted and implemented January 1st, 1997. At that time, they zoned a part of the county, not the whole county was zoned at that time. This ordinance had a lot to do with, if y'all are from Burke County for a while, the Save Lake James movement. There was a big development that was proposed on Lake James, and a lot of folks had a problem with that, questions about it, because at the time the county didn't have any rules really to go by. So the county enacted a moratorium on development, and that gave time for the county to look into the development, future development of Lake James and the county, and come up with some standards to be put in place for development. And so that ordinance was, as I said, adopted on January 1st, 1997, and then later, in 1999, Burke sought to have the whole county zoned, and that was big news again at that time, and that did happen. In 1999, the county adopted countywide zoning, and so we've been enforcing that zoning ordinance since that time. Now, of course, over time, over years, that ordinance been amended and amended and amended and amended many numerous times. And so all those amendments were incorporated into the ordinance and different times for different reasons. And that ordinance at times, even to us, can sort of be confusing. And so all these years have gone by, about 20 years close to it, and so fast forward to summer of 2019, and the county said, let's look at this zoning thing and this ordinance and just see, you know, is this still a good ordinance for us after all these years. And so the staff began to look at that and talk amongst each other. We met numerous times as staff just to see, okay, what kind of issues are happening that the ordinance does not address? What are people complaining about that do development? What kind of things? Is it too restrictive? Is it too not restrictive enough? One thing that kept coming back was that the ordinance was basically just a static, bland text document from cover to cover, around 200 pages, is it currently now, close to it, of just text and regulations, not a picture in the whole ordinance. And so that's was sort of the overwhelming thought that a lot of people had. And so that was one of the priorities that we were looking at while we were thinking about doing a rewrite of the ordinance. Another thing that came into play was the state legislature passed a complete overhaul of the planning and zoning regulations for cities and counties. In the past, the cities had regulations, the counties had regulations. They were in two separate places. And then in some places, the county regulation referred to the city regulations for this particular statute. And it was like that for many, many years. The legislature in 2019, around the same time, they held session and voted new law, which ended up being General Statute 160D into law. And so that 160D legislation basically took the city ordinances, county ordinances, and combined them into one ordinance. So both cities and counties follow the same statute. And that was huge. It pertained to land use planning, zoning, building inspections, minimum housing, just about any kind of regulation that city and counties do outside of like police enforcement. Anything land use related, it touched on. And so that was being done, and so they started giving us updates of these things. And so when the state adopted it, they said, you have to put these in your ordinance by a certain time, which turned out to be July 1st of this year. So staff has, all across the state, cities and counties, been working hard to try to adopt these new rules into their ordinances. Many ordinances, including Burke County's ordinance, had most of this stuff in place, but the new legislation did change some things a bit and move things around. So it was going to require quite a bit of work in itself. The jurisdictions that were not doing a complete rewrite, as Burke County was, they were going to have to adopt each of these as individual text amendments to those sections of ordinance. Burke County, as they were doing, looking at doing a complete rewrite anyway, we adopted those into the rewrite. So what we're proposing to do is adopt the new ordinance and rescind the old zoning ordinance, and actually rescind the old and adopt the new, should say. cart before the horse. But that's what's going on here. I'll get into a little bit briefly of the work that went into this and sort of the timeline. Again, summer of 2019, we began to look at this and overall what was going on with the ordinance, complaints, specific complaints, trends that we saw taking place in not only Burke County, but across the state and the country. And then, of course, incorporate the new statutes into that as well. So what the staff in the county did was to form an advisory committee made up of 12 individuals that would get together and take this ordinance and tear it apart and go from cover to cover in this rewrite, adopting the new general statutes and trying to just basically make the ordinance a better document for everyone, the public and for staff. And so that took close to a year and a half of hard work to do that. Staff met almost daily to talk about it, but once a week for 3 hours at a time to go through it. And then once the advisory committee was formed, that committee would meet once a month during all that time. I think pretty much consistently, except for maybe a couple months when COVID was messing things up a bit. But anyway, this is the ordinance advisory committee that was part of this, and wanted to make sure that they were recognized in this. There were county representatives from different departments, agencies, and then there was 4 staff members from the planning department. The public volunteers on the right gave up of their time to sit in on these meetings, which would last for several hours each month. And you know, it's just regulation. So my hat goes off to those folks that sat through all that, and they were very, very helpful because just like any of you that might have been on, y'all see the regulations from a different perspective. Then this is our jobs. We do it every day, and we know it. We've been trained to write it and enforce it. But to y'all, this stuff, you know, might be a bunch of hooey, and you don't care much about it. Well, that's what we needed to know from these folks that participated on this committee. And it was just great working with those folks, and they gave a lot of perspective from their areas. Some were in real estate, some were in building and construction, some just average citizens, retired, and let's see, all different walks of life, really. Then the staff, there was people in agriculture, and a commissioner, a planning board member was on there as well. So it was a good group, made diverse group there. So following the advisory committee meeting, staff would review the comments and questions, concerns that the committee had. Then we'd go back and work through those, come up with solutions or some type of remedy if it was an issue. But mainly, again, the big topic was that the ordinance needed to be redesigned, needed to be more user-friendly, needed to be able to be navigated through where you could find one thing from another place without having to flip through all those pages. So I'd like to give a shout out to Jennifer Forney here, who she kind of headed up this whole zoning ordinance rewrite. And we basically followed her lead during this time. And she started out by entering the information in Microsoft Word and quickly found out that that was not going to do a good job for creating the document we wanted to create. So she kind of took it upon herself to learn a whole new software program that a lot of professional media people use for magazines and newspapers and things of that nature, and that's an Adobe InDesign software. So what she did was to incorporate links and graphics and tabs and all sorts of things into this document, as well as pictures and things, so that it'd be a more user-friendly document. So again, I've mentioned that questionnaire already. These were the questions on that questionnaire, and we got answers to those. And again, those were brought before the committee and sort of brainstormed through those to work towards as we wrote each section. So the one part of the ordinance that is going to be new deals with something called short-term rentals. Some of y'all may or may not know what that means, but it's a huge, huge business all across the country and in Burke County as well. And we didn't really know about it much until we started getting some issues from neighbors to these short-term rentals. And what's short-term rental? And so and we found out very quickly what a short-term rental was, and with discussions, multiple discussions, and with county leaders, and decided that they wanted to take some sort of first step into regulating short-term rentals. Not to prohibit them in any way. They of course bring revenue into the county, bring tourists into the county, bringing people in that might be passing through and staying here that might like Burke County and maybe someday decide to live here. We got many things to offer many people, and so they are an asset to the county. But on the other side of the coin, there can be, if they're not done correctly, I don't want to say anything other than that, but they could be a problem to a neighbor that may be a full-time resident there. So we took a first stab at a short-term rental ordinance. And so that was incorporated into the overall zoning ordinance rewrite. And so that sort of brings us up to where we are today. I mentioned some of these other things, such as the rezonings that were coming out of the zoning ordinance rewrite. And what that is, it's the county has 4 conservation districts out towards Lake James and up towards the Pisgah area and sort of along Catawba River. Those conservation districts were put in place to protect water quality and the aesthetics of that area. Well, they all had about the same regulations and allowances for those different districts. Some of what were called conditional districts were sort of like Hawksbill. They were a planned development that at the time the state legislature allowed for those conditional districts. Well, when they did that 160D overhaul, they said you couldn't have conditional districts of this nature anymore. So that's one of the things cities and counties have to address and do away with, is these conditional districts. So the four conservation districts, 2 of which are conditional districts, are all being combined into one district, which will just be conservation district. Again, there wasn't a big issue because they all basically had the same allowances and same regulations. They were just named different things. The one thing that was a difference to these were that the estate lot conservation districts require 5 acres or more, a minimum amount of land for a subdivision of land or a home on the land. The low-density conservation district required 3.5 acres of land for a subdivision of land or a home on the land. What the county's proposing to do when they combine the conservation districts into one is to have one consistent minimum lot size density area of 3 acres per home or subdivision. So that would consolidate the conservation districts and have a consistent minimum lot size or density for that conservation district. The other thing that the county is proposing to do is currently, whether you know or not, along the I-40 corridor, there's a I-40 overlay district, and that district sits sort of on top of what is the conventional or standard zoning district. So if a property's residential, this overlay sits here, and it basically doesn't affect residential development. But if that property was a commercial or industrial or institutional underlying district, then those I-40 regulations would be another layer of regulation on top that would apply to development along the I-40 corridor. Well, that's the only place in the county that had development regulations for commercial industrial developments. Anywhere else in the county, they wouldn't have to follow nothing except for the site plan. So the county's proposing to take those development regulations for commercial industrial properties and make it countywide. And if that happens, then there's really no longer a need for the I-40 overlay district. So the expansion of non-residential development standards countywide would essentially allow for the rescission of the I-40 overlay district. So that's one of the rezonings that y'all will be hearing shortly. The other one of the main things, again, was the short-term rentals, and then there was also a new establishment of zoning standards for floating vessels. And finally, one of the bigger things, not that it's that big, but there was the property setbacks for new development. If it was residential, you had a 10-foot setback off the property line, side and rear. We're proposing to increase that just a few feet, because for whatever reason, people build a house right up on the property line and this one right up on the property line, and then it sort of creates problems. So we're just wanting to space that out a little bit. It primarily is more effective for, again, that commercial industrial development, because they only had to meet that same 10-foot side and rear setback that a residential structure had to meet. So we're proposing to increase the commercial industrial setback by a bit more than what it is for residential. And that's basically the bulk of the new changes in the zoning ordinance. The other things haven't changed at all, or some are just wording kind of changes. So that brings us to zoning map amendment 2000, whoops.
That's the wrong one.
Wrong one. That brings us back to zoning text amendment 2021-01, although the amendment would be to rescind the entire ordinance and then adopt the new ordinance in its entirety. So that is what is before you here in this report and decision.
Thank you, Pete.
Sure.
I want to say that I want to commend the planning department for their work. They worked very hard. They were a visionary group, great bunch of people. We all worked great together. We had our differences, but nobody got hit, so everything's fine. Again, Pete did it. I want to say it. Jennifer went out of her way. She, above and beyond the call of duty, she did brilliant work. I've looked over this stuff. It is great. It is wonderful. Now, I'm not a big fan of zoning, but there's times when you have to have it. And Jennifer, you did great work.
We
We're
also
all
want
proud
to
of you.
acknowledge Bradley Kirkley.
Oh,
the
yeah,
zoning
Brad, I said the
administrator
planning
back-
department.
Back of the room there.
Yeah,
That
Bradley.
gentleman back there has the job of administering that ordinance and issuing permits. So he's got to know this thing from cover to cover, and when you call, have your answers for you. And when you come in to get permits, he'll be the one to help you. So that gentleman back there, get to know him.
Oh, yes.
Because he's very important.
Yes.
Turn it
Okay.
Back to you.
I had to commend everybody. We worked real hard. We had a good time, and I learned a lot. So anyway, so what we're gonna, does the board have any questions for Pete at all?
Not
No.
this time.
Okay. Then I'm gonna open this up to a public hearing. And
The 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Jennifer read you the riot act.
Okay, so when I call your name, come up to the podium. Once you write your name and state your name, then you'll have 3 minutes. As you're speaking, when you get to your first 2 minutes, you'll hear a chime. And then when you get to your 3 minutes, you'll hear another chime. At that time, you'll need to wrap up your comments and return to your seat.
Richard, I'd like to say one thing before we
Yeah,
start.
go ahead.
This forum to discuss about this is for you to come up and either give your opinions for or against the zoning regulations. This really isn't the correct forum for questions. If you have questions, you need to contact the planning office tomorrow
Yeah.
to ask for clarification or questions about it. This is primarily for your opinions for or against what's being proposed.
Right. We've had, like I said, a month or so, maybe more than that, over a month of open forum for questions. And so that time sort of has passed. The ordinance has to move through the process now. But having said that, we still care about what what your opinions are, what your questions might be. You may not have attended one of those public information meetings. You may not have filled out the questionnaire, so you probably and may still have questions, and we're happy to answer those. But this would not be the exchange of answers at this time.
Well, who's up?
Our first speaker is going to be Christy Leonard.
Hey there. Good afternoon. I don't have a whole lot to say. I really wanted to hear more of the opinions. I won't say that I know 100% of everything that has went on, but I've kind of read over the regulations. So I do manage VRBOs in the area around the lake. In fact, I own one myself. A local real estate agent as well. And I understand that this is just for opinion-based, so that's what I'll keep it at. Around the lake, I don't have a definitive number at this time. One of the owners at Lake James Real Estate, we've got somewhere in the ballpark of around 30 lake communities. 2/3, not exact again, but about 2/3. At one point we had a pretty definitive list and things changed. 2/3 of these communities do not allow short-term rentals. So when someone buys into a community that does allow short-term rentals, they are buying in with the full knowledge that either it does or it does not allow those. Okay? So if you are a person who wishes to not live in a community that allows short-term rentals, then you have actually more opportunity to purchase around our lake, because 2/3 are communities that do not allow it per HOA rules than you do to buy into one that does allow it. So I am in full agreement, myself personally, with there being a somewhat nearby representative. That's part of how I make my living. We have, knock on wood, not had any major incidents in quite a few years that I have managed VRBOs. My husband and I own a local building business. Emergencies or anything else are taken care of in a very, very prompt manner. Rules are set and regulations are set forth before folks can even rent these. So maybe there are issues with those that wish to rent that have no local person, or maybe they live in another state. 100% understand that. If I were a neighbor living in there and somebody, I would want somebody to contact. Nothing against that. I understand that is not the board's wish, as you're saying, to rid the area of these, because that would be a travesty. And well, I'm sure in every community in the United States there's someone that doesn't want someone they know beside them. But I would say, please remember that that can happen anytime. Somebody can have a guest that you don't like at the house next to you. Anybody can rent their home to a long-term rental. So please remember those facts. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Bert Mackey. Next, we have Lauren Van Riper.
Never done this before. I own a short-term rental in Holiday Shores. I have not met a lot of my neighbors, not despite trying to meet some of my neighbors, but I came to Lake James in 2016, stayed at a VRBO, stayed with my brother, decided I fell in love with the lake. I grew up on a lake. I love the lake. It's gorgeous out here. So I immediately wanted to find a place that I could find for a happy place. I found it, Holiday Shores. It was a rental home for decades before. It had been sitting on the market for 5 years, starting to feel disrepair or whatever. I worked on it, bought it in 17, and I met the nicest neighbors. I met Joy and Steve, I met Potsy and Mike next door. How could it get better? I am on a lake, I have nice neighbors, this is awesome. Met my neighbor the first day, you know, I own the house, and she comes over and we're sitting on the dock and we're talking, and she goes, well, the cleats on the dock are, you know, they block my boat from getting in and out. And I said, okay, zip, 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 zip. Took the cleats over, put them on the other side of the dock, solved the problem. She goes, I've been worrying about that for years. Why didn't you ask him? Fixed a problem she had almost within 5 minutes of meeting her, no problems. Go forward about 6 months, signs start popping up. And my cleaner calls me and goes, there's signs all over the neighborhood. Neighborhoods are for neighbors, not for short-term rentals. I said, well, it can't be for my neighbors. We've had a great relationship. He goes, there's 3 in your next door neighbor's property. And I was like, what's going on? That's when drive-bys started, harassing emails from the homeowners association, accusations that we're ruining the water table by our septic, not paying our sales and use tax, inviting undesirables into the neighborhood, stealing signs. I've gotten 3 zoning violations from the board. Notices, frequent complaints. The Burke County Sheriff has ticketed my brother for parking on the street while he was at dinner at my house, called by my neighbor. I'm at a dead end. Okay. I've also I bought a piece of property next to my house. The zoning board was called because I parked my boat on it. No one called, asked, hey, is that your boat? Could have walked over. Hey, is that your boat? Yeah. Oh, okay. No, I got a zoning violation. I've been harassed and harangued, and I'm doing nothing but improving the property, cleaning it up, have to keep it clean. Guests don't want to come to a place that looks like it's disturbed. I moved in, there was a yellow house in the front of the neighborhood, had squatters living in it. No one knew. But there was a Burke County Sheriff that lived next door. But I'm the bad guy. My husband is of forestry, fought the fires on Smith's Mountain. We're not bad people. All we had to do was talk to your neighbor. And I asked to be on the advisory board. I've speaking with you a couple of times. I unfortunately know the planning board better than I know my neighbors.
No. Thank you.
Next is David Bernard.
Plan right here. First of all, I'd like to thank you for looking at the short-term rental situation, and I agree with a lot of the changes that I've seen that you've made. I've lived in Burke County for 25 years in a neighborhood that obviously didn't have a homeowners association, and short-term rentals were not even, they were a thing of the future, you know, like 20 years from now. So we moved into a neighborhood, and we expected with our kids to have quiet enjoyment in our neighborhood. And quite honestly, I'm not against short-term rentals. I'm against the abuse of the short-term rental. And there's been plenty of abuse. There's been parties, there's been many people living in a house that wasn't built for that many people. And then the other thing I would like to say is that the lake overlay situation, our community is about 60 years old, and our septic systems are at least 60 years old. They're very fragile, and we're on lots that are about 2/3 of an acre. And I think if a short-term rental should be allowed, I think the septic system should be inspected every year to make sure that they're safe and they don't have any danger of harming the lake. Matter of fact, a house 2 doors from us, well, 1 door away from us, had his son, his wife, and his other son, his grandson, move in. And within 6 months, the septic system went bad, and they had to redo the whole thing. So we're really concerned about conservation and safety, and those are our two main things. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Next is John Steen.
Good evening to the members of the board. Jennifer and Mr. Kirkley, thank you for your long hours on this issue with the short-term rental. I listened to one of the owners who rents their house, and that was the lady that was up here just moments ago, Lauren Van Riper. Miss Van Riper made mention about her neighbors, how well she gets along with her neighbors, and how she worked on her house to make this a house for who? For her? For her family? No. I have here, 9 months ago, a renter at Mrs. Van Riper's house. By the way, Mrs. Van Riper and her husband live 6 hours away. So if there's an issue, it's 6 hours away to contact them. Mrs. Van Riper mentioned about the deputies called. Yes, indeed, the deputies were called. Why were the deputies called? Because where her rental home is, it's on a dead end. It's in a cul-de-sac. Emergency vehicles could not turn around in this cul-de-sac. There were 2 instances on this particular street of individuals who might have needed an ambulance. One person is paralyzed from the waist down. Another person was dealing with a deadly disease called cancer. Mrs. Van Riper was notified that if you're going to rent your house, you have to get these cars off that cul-de-sac and onto your property. So I'm going to read into the record one of the renters that rented this house. The place was great, very accommodating. Views were awesome. We were snubbed on our deposit because of too many people, which were 2 kids, 2 years and younger, also had only 2 garbage cans for 4 days. Can you imagine that? 2 garbage cans for 4 days. And they were full by the second night. Boy, there must have been a lot of people there. So when we left, we stacked our bags up around the 2 garbage cans. That was another reason we lost our security deposit. The refrigerator was not working properly, so we had to buy ice to keep our food cold. At that point, Mrs. Van Riper responds, "Hi, Sarah. Thank you for your feedback. We do pride ourselves on providing our guests." Wait a minute, did I say guests? I didn't say somebody that owns a house, working on a house that wants to be part of our neighborhood. No, I said guests. With a wonderful home to make memories. We agree the views were amazing. We try our best to very accommodate. Regretfully, we did withhold the deposit as detailed in our email. It is the first time in 4 years of renting, 4 years of renting, by the way, not living there, 4 years of renting, that we experienced first with your group. Our posted occupancy is limited to 8. 8. By the way, look at the property card and that'll tell the story. How many people are at Mrs. Van Riper's house? Does anybody want to guess? Well, let me tell you what's written here in writing.
Your
20.
time's up, sir.
Thank you very much. 20 people.
Before we continue, let me remind you that your comments are to be made to the board, not to anyone else. We are not here to call anyone else out. Please be respectful in your comments. Next, we have Randy Steen.
Members of the planning board, thank you for hearing us. And I would personally, as a layperson, having read through the past ordinance several times, all 200 plus pages, and having read through the new ordinance, kudos, kudos, kudos. It is readable, it is clear, it addresses a number of things, particularly with the short-term rentals. First, I'd like to say next month, middle of the month, we will have owned our house in Holiday Shores 20 years. I and my husband, like Mr. Bernard, came here, knew it was R1 zoning when it became R1 zoning, and expected that that was a residential property. This issue with short-term rentals started to come to a head back in 2018 when our neighborhood, which is one of the very few in the Burke side that does not have homeowner association rules, got faced with the issue that people started buying their homes, or houses, not to live in them, but to rent, to operate a business. We began, and through these past 3 years, I have cleaned up garbage, I've done a number of other things that have been apart from this. I commend and implore what you have written in the new ordinance regarding the issues that we started to address back in the the Board of Adjustment in November 2018. Number one, we pointed out to the Board of Adjustment, we could prove that the taxes were not being collected. The new ordinance addresses this. Kudos, I'm an accountant, I'd like to see taxes collected. Number two, the use of the property, particularly in Holiday Shores. Our plots of land are not currently buildable. Our plots of land are on 0.4, 0.3, 0.23 acres, so we have tight property lines. That is one of the things that we're concerned about. It's been addressed on the septic. The use of the property and the excessive use and the parties has now been addressed in a new ordinance, and we commend that. We're also very pleased, and when I'm saying we, that means probably the majority of my neighborhood. Many are here tonight in support of the short-term rental changes. We're not speaking. Our neighborhood is very pleased that the length of time for compliance is now 1 year rather than the 3 years originally proposed. So in summary, I love living at my house. I love people enjoying the lake. What we just don't enjoy is the abuses that have come with the unregulated short-term rental. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, point of personal privilege. Can we ask folks as they come up to state their name again
Yes,
so I can
yes,
hear it?
yes. We should have done that. I think we did mention that. Okay. Who's up next, Jennifer?
The next person is Cynthia Vance.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Vance. I live in High Peak Mountain Estates. We are a private owners organization, and we have many people concerned about short-term rentals. We're worried about very many aspects. So I appreciate you doing all the work you've been doing to help us get the regulations going. I'm in favor of strong and strict regulations to keep short-term rental owners, keeping everything intact and making sure there's safety for the community. In particular, one of the ordinances I hope that you're going to address is going to be one that has an owner of the property living there at least 4 months out of the year. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are all the names I have on the list.
That's it?
May I say something?
Speak.
Wait,
Come up to the microphone.
Please state your name.
Do I need to sign in?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Timothy Green. I live at Holiday Shores, the old part at Lake James. I just gotta say, guys, I'm really proud of y'all. Don't look like you got in a fight. Nobody threw rocks. Nobody didn't shoot each other. Really, I know you've had a hard time getting here. I know Brad has worked hard, and each one of you has worked hard, and I just got to say I'm proud of you because it's very hard to get through all these regulations and redo what you've done. I know how hard it is, and you know, everybody's for regulations as long as it's not for them. Well, I'm like that too. As long as it don't bother me, then I'm fine with it. But I'll have to say that you've done a fine job, and I'm for the regulations. I don't like some regulations when they affect me, like everybody else. But we've got to get this under control, and I think this is a great step in doing it. We have a situation at the lake where we do have small lots and a lot of septic issues, and septic's not the only one. But I'm not against short-term rentals. But you can't put 20 people in a house that's got 2 bedrooms. So I think you're moving in the right way. I just want to say, Bradley, I appreciate everything that you've done, and everybody else that's not here that's really helped you with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Anybody else wants to say something? No? Okay. I'm closing the public hearing. And what is the action, and does the board have any questions, comments, anything?
I have one comment.
Make a comment.
I know that for those of you in Holiday Shores, this has been really hard, and I'm sorry that it has been so hard for everyone involved. I appreciate everybody's patience, the way that y'all have held decorum tonight, because I know this is your home, and that this is really impactful for each and every one of you. To us, it's a document. So I appreciate all of you, and I'm sorry for how hard it's been up there for many, many years. But I hope this does help in some way begin to fix some of that.
How come she gets applause and I don't? Oh, okay. So, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to rescind the current Burke County zoning ordinance and adapt the proposed Burke County zoning ordinance.
Do I hear a second? I have a second. Do I hear a vote? And it's carried. Thank you very much. Can we take about a 10-minute? Okay, we're going to recess for about 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. We'd like to see the public here. Thank you very much. We're going to take about 10 minutes, and I'm going to stretch. Folks. Oops.
First one.
Where'd everybody go?
Guess we're all getting on the same page.
Great, I'm so glad.
Let me check the conversation.
Okay. This went better than I thought. Better than I thought.
Y'all are awesome.
I thought sure we had more people.
Well, it probably would have went more if we were entertaining questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have a list for this one, so we're good to go.
Okay.
Okay, ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back in session. ZMA 202104. Estate Lot Conservation. Pete, take over.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the public. Hey, Sheriff.
Thank you for being here.
Appreciate you being here. Okay, so I went through the whole thing about the rezoning and everything it was attempting to do.
Thank you.
I briefly mentioned the rezonings in that presentation, so we'll get into that here. And we have, because they're each a different district, they have to be addressed separately. Can't just take them all and rezone everything that way. So 2021-04 zoning map amendment is what we're looking at here. Okay, so I went through a lot of the background before with the ordinance. I won't rehash all of that, but these rezonings came out of the rewrite of the zoning ordinance. So what we have is 4 individual conservation districts out in the county. You have your estate lot conservation, estate lot conservation conditional district, low density conservation district, and low density conservation conditional district. And I may get the wording out of place, never get that right the same twice, but those 4 districts are being proposed to be consolidated into one district. The approvals and requirements will all be consistent across the board. It's just one district now. And then the main difference, as I mentioned before, those current 5 acre per lot and 5 acre per dwelling requirements for the estate lot and the 3.5 acre per home per lot requirements for low density conservation would be changed to a consistent 3 acres per lot per home requirement. So that's basically the gist of the rezoning here, but there's the map, and yeah, I think it's showing everything. When I did my presentation, sometimes it kind of shrinks or expands and you don't see, but you see all the way to the top left down to over to the east a bit. That's also included along with this down through here, and then as I mentioned up through there. Those parcels in my review, I think it's about 113 parcels that are included there. And so all of those parcels are supposed to be rezoned from the estate lot, conservation estate lot district, CDE, to a newly proposed conservation district, CON. That is what is being proposed here tonight in this rezoning. So the conservation estate lot would be rescinded, and this district would be adopted.
That's it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does the, open up for a public meeting? No public, we close. Does the board have any questions to Pete? Action of the board?
Make a motion that ZMA 202104 is passed as presented.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Got a second? All in favor? Motion's carried. Next is ZMA 202105.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is along the same lines. This is another of the conservation districts that we are proposing to combine, consolidate. And so this particular district has to do with the, let me get the wording right, Conservation District Estate Lot Conditional District. CDE, CD, and then this is affecting 158 parcels, which would be rezoned to the proposed conservation district, and that CDE, CD would be rescinded. That's my report for that
Okay.
one.
Okay. Any
Oh,
questions?
I'm sorry. Let me show you the map just
Oh,
so
okay.
we are do our proper identification. You see the same outline here, here, over here. Those are the parcels to be rezoned.
Any questions?
I have a question as much as a reminder to me, really. But,
Okay.
so, and it applies to all these, right? If it's my understanding, all of them go down to 3 acres now, is that, in all
Right,
these, in the CON?
That's correct.
So basically, restrictions are being relaxed,
A little
in
bit
my opinion.
relaxed. These
Okay.
CDE properties currently have 5 acres per lot, or density of 5 acres. And so that would change to 3 acres now.
Any other? Let's have a motion.
Make a motion that ZMA 202105 be approved as presented.
Second? Got a second? All in favor? Motion's carried. ZMA 202106.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again. Right, so this, again, it's another conservation district, except this, we're now moving into the low-density conservation district, CDL. So we're proposing to rescind the CDL district and to adopt the conservation district and the 471 parcels that make up that CDL district to be rezoned to conservation.
Okay. We open up for a public. We close the public. Any questions from the board? No? Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion that ZMA 2021-06 be approved as presented.
Got a second? All in favor? Motion's carried. ZMA 202107.
Mr. Chairman, okay, again, for our last conservation district rezoning, this is 2001-07 zoning map amendment. This has to do, again, with the low-density conservation district, but this is the also conditional district attached to it. So there's approximately 119 parcels that are included in this district, and you see them outlined there. 3,000 plus acres are one parcel,
Wow.
basically. So state parkland. It's over 3,000 acres there. That's one of the parcels. Then these are individually, it's just the outline of the entirety of those parcels in that area. So this would rescind the conservation district, low density conditional district, and adopt the conservation district by rezoning those parcels.
Any questions? No? Oh, thank you. Open it up, and we close it. Again, any questions? No? Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve ZMA 2021-07 as presented.
And I got a second? I got a second. All in favor? Motion's carried. Are we gonna take up 8 now, right? Yeah.
Okay, this is our final rezoning in order of business for this evening, and it's zoning map amendment 2021-08. This does not involve conservation district. This involves the I-40 overlay district. And so in my zoning ordinance presentation, I mentioned that briefly, but what this is doing is you have your underlying zoning districts, residential 1, 2, 3, general business, industrial, office, institutional, neighborhood business. Those are your general zoning districts. On top of that sits another layer of regulation called the I-40 overlay district. Those regulations only apply to non-residential development. So currently, only the I-40 overlay district has specific regulations for non-residential development. The county's proposing to adopt those same standards countywide for non-residential development. And in doing so, there would no longer be need for the I-40 overlay district. So the request is to rescind the I-40 overlay district for those 3,732 parcels that make up that district. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. So from county line to county line, you have that district, and there's quite a few parcels there. Not to worry that the restrictions, that extra layer of restriction and requirements won't go away. They'll still apply because this would be countywide now. So.
Okay. Any questions from the board? No? Public? Nobody? We close. Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion that ZMA 2021-08 be approved as presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? It's carried.
Hallelujah.
Mr. Chair, I make the motion at this time that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
What was that?
Motion to adjourn.
Our next meeting is June 24th, 2021. All in favor, raise your hands. We're out of here.